If you've studied for logic games before, you're probably aware that one of the most important habits to develop in the section is drawing out a new diagram and inputting the new condition into that diagram whenever you get a question that gives you a new rule. For example, let's say you have a question that says, if f is in third, then what could be true? Generally speaking, you'd want to draw out a new diagram, put f in third, see what other inferences follow from putting f in third, and you draw that out before you look at the answer choices. But what happens if you put f in third and there's no obvious next step? None of the rules seem to trigger based on f, and there's no clear inference. Or maybe you can make one or two inferences, but that's still not enough to make the correct answer easy to spot. This is a situation in which there is a huge difference between what someone who's just pretty good at games will do and what someone who is a perfect scorer will do. Someone who's just pretty good at games will go to the answers and try to solve the question through a combination of visualizing the answer choices against what they've drawn, and they'll also be willing to pencil out one or two, maybe three different answers if they need to, in order to figure out what's the correct answer. But someone who's consistently finishing logic game sections perfectly will often look for an opportunity to draw multiple diagrams before going to the answers in order to see the remaining rules and relationships a little bit more clearly and perhaps make some hidden inferences that aren't really evident until you do a little bit more work. If you're familiar with the strategy of drawing worlds at the start of a game in order to make the set of questions easier, you can think of this strategy as drawing worlds but just for that individual question. Let's look at a quick example. Here we're doing an ordering game where we have 7 different students who are trying out for a debate team, and we're keeping track of the order in which they try out. Each of them goes one at a time. The first rule says F has to go immediately before L, so we have an FL block, and this block comes earlier than O. The next rule says A and L, they can't go next to each other, and it doesn't matter the order. Same thing with J and B, they can't go next to each other and it doesn't matter the order. The fourth rule says if F tries out first, then M has to try out fifth, and then finally O cannot try out sixth. You'll notice that every single letter is mentioned in a rule, and that's why I've done a tick mark above every single letter. One final thing that I might do if I were presented with this set of rules is, let me just add on to this O over here, the fact that O can't go in sixth. That just makes it a little bit easier to remember. I tend to forget about a rule like that. Now let's say we get the following question. If A is the fourth person to try out for the team, then which one of the following must be false? And feel free to pause the video and try to solve this question on your own first. So someone who's pretty good at games would probably realize that to solve this question effectively, we should draw out a new set of 7 slots, make sure to put O can't go in sixth, that was one of the original rules, and then we'd have to draw out A in fourth, that's the new condition. Then we would look to the rules to see what we know about A, what we know about the fourth spot, whether there's any rule or relationship that must go in a particular place, and since we know that A can't go next to L, we would know that L can't go third and L can't go fifth. Now someone might also realize that because F has to come immediately before L, that means that if L can't go third, we also know that F can't go second, because F in second would force the L in third, which doesn't work. Now this is where it looks like we're stopped as far as inferences go, because none of the other rules is going to force a letter into a particular spot. It seems like we have options about where this FL block would go. For example, the FL looks like it could go in 1, 2, it could go in 5, 6 as well to leave room for the O after it. It's not clear where the B or the J would go. This is the point where a lot of people would go to the answers now, and if the question is easy, they'll just give us maybe F in second, L in third, or L in fifth, but if they don't give us one of those easy must-be-false answers, a lot of people would find this problem challenging. They might try to visualize the answers in their mind to see if it could be true, and they might have to pencil out 1 or 2 answers to test it out to see whether it could be true. Now this strategy would be successful for a lot of people who are good at games. You know, you could still get to the right answer without doing much more work. It is possible to think about why the correct answer is correct and to realize that without drawing out too much. But if that's your approach to this situation, You may not realize just how much harder you're making it for yourself if you try to solve this question just in your mind. You see, if we just do some more work up front before going to the answers, it can actually make the correct answer a lot easier to spot. What many perfect scorers would do is once they realize that A in 4 just results in a couple of inferences about where the F and the L can't go, they would then direct their attention to the FL block, that FL block rule, which tends to be very restrictive. Blocks tend to fit only in a couple of different places. And so let's think about where that FL block can go. It can go in either 1, 2, or it can go in 5 and 6. And this is where someone who's really good at games will often just draw both of those out automatically without really thinking too hard about whether it's worth it. For me, I'm going to start with FL in 5, 6 because I can see that obviously is going to put O in 7. And then what are the remaining letters? We still have the B and the J, which can't go next to each other. And since there's only 3 more spots left, that means the B and the J have to be split up. And that would leave the final letter, which is our M, to go in the second spot. And of course, that does not violate this conditional rule, because if F is in 1, then M is in 5. But if F is not in 1, then you don't have to worry about that rule. So this is one possibility for what would happen if A is in 4. This is where the FL is in 5, 6. And then let's take the opportunity to draw out the other place where the FL can go, which is in 1 and 2. And now we still have spot number 3, 5, 6, and 7. So I know that the O has to come after FL, but it looks like the O could go in 3 or 5 or 7. That's what it seems like the O can do. Let me also look at the other rules. J and B, we don't know exactly where they go yet. If F is in 1, however, so if F is in 1, then that means M has to go in 5. So now I have to put the M in 5. Now let me go back and think about the O as well as the B and the J. If you put the O in spot number 3, do you see that what's going to happen is B and J are going to be bunched up in 6 and 7, which violates this third rule. If you put the O over here, that's not going to work because B and J would be forced together over there. So that means O cannot go in spot number 3 in this world. And since the O also can't go in the 6th spot, that was one of our original rules, that means the O is forced to go into 7, and the final letters are the B and the J, which are going to split up like this. So this is what happens when A is in 4. You have 2 different possibilities for the F and the L, and we followed through on each of the rules to figure out where other letters would go in each of those possibilities. We're looking for it must be false. A says L is second, we know it can go second. B says M tries out second, we already know it can go second. O is 7th. Turns out that actually must be true, so it's not a must be false. D says M is 3rd. No, B or J is 3rd, so that's why D is the answer. Now some of you might be wondering, well, doesn't drawing out these 2 diagrams for where the FL could go when A is 4th, doesn't that take time, and doesn't it take time to apply the rules and draw this out? So wouldn't it take even longer than just going to the answers and trying to see the answer in your mind? And yeah, I mean, sometimes the right answer is just going to be answer choice A or B, and maybe you could see that very quickly. Or sometimes the answer is just going to be very obvious to you because it just sticks out. But you're probably forgetting about all those times where you tried to just look at the answers and picture it in your mind, but the question ended up taking 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and that's because you were maybe forgetting about one of the rules, or there was just some hidden inference that was hard for you to spot until you ended up penciling out 2 or 3 different answer choices. What you might not realize is that, on average, doing more work up front for the question like this, being willing to draw out 2, sometimes even 3 different diagrams for a single question, actually saves you time overall. While there might be an individual question here or there that you can solve quickly by foregoing this work and just going to the answers, in my experience across the balance of games, across all the different games out there, all the different questions, someone who takes time to solve the question like this, rather than just going directly to the answers, is going to do a lot better in the game section. So I hope you can see that sometimes drawing more work up front before going to the answers actually allows you to solve the question more easily, more quickly, and uses less mental energy. And as a bonus, you can often use that work that you've drawn on other questions to help you eliminate answers. Someone who's just doing the question in their head will often be able to solve the question successfully, but they'll do it with less certainty, it'll often take more energy, take more time, and they also won't have the benefit of that work to use on later questions. So if you are currently in the position of being pretty good at games, it's just that you're not consistently finishing 4 games or consistently finishing 3 games, see if sometimes you're not using this technique when you could be using it. If you ever get stuck on one of these if questions and you put down the condition but you're still left with a choice about where another important rule or variable will go, instead of just doing it in your head, try actually exploring both forks and drawing out both options, because it actually ends up being a lot easier.